When I moved to Florida back in January of 2008, we were on the cusp of the last great financial crisis and a big recession, the last big recession this country has had. And I was only 20 years old at the time, didn't pay much attention to that stuff. But what I did pay attention to was my own personal finances, since it was the first time I was living on my own. And even though it was more expensive to live down here than Illinois, I still thought it was reasonable for the lifestyle I was getting. I figured, hey, I can make a couple $1,000s a month down here, and if my rent is $900 a month, I can float that. You know, sure, the rent is half of your income. That breaks all the rules of having a place more expensive than you're supposed to have compared to your income, but that's what was available. I made it work because I didn't really have any other expenses really besides the rent and the utilities and food. But now, fast forward 16 years later, the cost of living here in Florida has absolutely exploded. Basically, everybody has been priced out of the paradise of Florida unless you are extremely rich, guys. Even in the more affordable areas of Florida, it has gotten shockingly expensive. I came across a study today from Go Banking Rates, and what they did is they took a bunch of income and home price data from the 50 most populous cities in the state of Florida. And what they found out was truly shocking, because in the 50 most populous cities, even the cheapest places to live now, you have to earn a substantial amount of money to make it work financially. And coincidentally, the most expensive city to live in all of Florida when it comes to population size now is right here in Miami Beach, where we're walking through. This has been my home in Florida since I moved here. I've never lived anywhere else in Florida, but I have visited all over the state, and there are plenty of great places to live. You don't have to live somewhere like here in order to have a good quality of life, that is for sure. But what this study did is they examined the average monthly mortgage payment, okay, with a 10% down payment, your essential living expenses, including groceries, healthcare, utilities, and transportation, were calculated to provide a comprehensive view of the monthly financial commitment. They're also using the budgeting rules of the 50-30-20, which allocates 50% of your income to housing and living expenses. And at the very top of this list of the cheapest place is Daytona Beach, Florida. And I've been up there a couple times actually, and I always kind of like the area. A lot of people say there's a lot of crime and shady things that happen over there. That wasn't my experience when I was there, but I'm sure if you stay anywhere long enough, you're gonna see some things go down, right? But here's where things kind of get twisted for me, guys, because this is supposedly the cheapest, most populous city in the state, right? Well, in order to live there, you need to make $76,979 per year in order to afford the average home value there, which is about $285,000. And it literally just gets more expensive from there on up. And so the reason why this is crazy is because that's probably double of what it was pre-pandemic as far as the cost of living in an area like Daytona Beach, especially the more crime-ridden areas of it. When you look at the top 10 list of the most affordable areas here, the shocking thing is you need to make anywhere between $76,000 a year and $90,000 a year just to afford the top 10 most affordable places here in Florida now. Never mind the most expensive ones. I'll get to those in a little bit here. But when you see how much the cost just to survive in these otherwise what used to be affordable areas has gone up, I mean, it just makes your jaw drop, guys. Like, you wouldn't really understand this if you haven't lived down here for a long time, because basically up until before the pandemic, Florida gave a pretty reasonable value. Now, prices were already really getting out of control, I would say, before the pandemic, but obviously after that, things just completely exploded like it did everywhere, past the realm of affordability for the average person here. Because now take a look at this. You want to live in Pine Hills, Florida, you need to make $81,000 a year. You want to live in Lakeland, Florida, you need to make $81,000 a year. Same thing with Deltona, Florida. Spring Hill, Florida, got to make $84,000 a year. Northport, you got to make $88,000 a year. This is typically like a retirement area, guys. Like, that's mostly who lives up there in Northport, Florida. Our retirees, you need to make $90,000 a year basically up there now, because the average home price is almost $350,000 there. Palm Coast, Florida, got to make $88,000 a year. Tallahassee, need to make $89,000 a year. Palm Bay, same thing, $89,000. Jacksonville, need to make $90,000 a year. And if you've ever been to a lot of these places, I've been to almost every single place on this list here, guys, except for Spring Hill, Florida. And let me tell you, like, most of these places are nothing to write home about. They're not fancy areas. In fact, like Jacksonville can be pretty dangerous. It's very big and spread out. Here we have a house on the wide open bay for $8.85 million. They started off asking $9.45 million back in September of last year. No luck. Couple of price cuts later, they've knocked $650K off the asking price and still no takers. Property tax bill here is a whopping $44,000 a year, and that is with a homestead exemption. This is not an investment property. Pay attention to this part for later on in the video, and we're going to talk about how the homestead exemption is basically a scam. But if you think all that is shocking, that's nothing compared to the most expensive places in Florida now, because when you look at the top 10 most expensive places, it is just stunning the incomes that are needed, guys. In Plantation, Florida, you need to make $128,000 a year now. Fort Lauderdale, $129,000. Pembroke Pines, $130,000. Davie, Florida, $130,000. Miami, we're talking Miami, the mainland, across the bay. This is Miami Beach where we're at here. You need $133,000 a year. Doral, you need $137,000 a year. Coral Springs, $138,000 a year. Boca Raton, $143,000 a year. Used to be a retirement mecca. Weston, Florida, $155,000 a year. Miami Beach, where we're walking right now, you need to now make a whopping $377,000 a year to afford the average home value here of about $2.38 million, guys. That is insane. Like, this is just blown so far out of proportion. I mean, I can't believe it. I used to come up and down this street and many others here in Miami Beach back in the day when I was selling real estate, and all of these houses used to be way less expensive than they are right now. The houses that are going for $2-3 million right now all used to be, you know, $700,000, $800,000. And what's really insane about this is it feels like Florida is literally becoming the next California in terms of the cost of living and the population boom that we've seen over the past few years. I don't think Florida will ever become as populous as California, but it's on its way to becoming just as expensive. And that brings me to the next problem here, because in Florida, you know, we don't have state income tax, which is a blessing, guys. And people, especially if you make a lot of money, which you need to now in order to live here, that's a great thing because it saves you a ton of money each year. But even though we don't have a state income tax, you will get taxed pretty heavily on your real estate, because the property taxes here have become a big issue throughout the state, along with the homeowner's insurance. But I'm going to show you guys why the homestead exemption is basically a lie at this point. So I'm going to share with you guys my own personal property tax bill after the new budget came into play for 2024. And as you can see by taking a look at this, this pretty much sums up my entire property tax history since I bought this condo here in Miami Beach. Because the first year was more expensive. I did not have the homestead exemption when I first bought the property. So you can see it was higher in the $9,000 range. And the second column is what my tax bill should have been if there was no budget change. But of course there was a bunch of budget changes, so really the only column all the way to the right is the one to pay attention to. This reflects my most recent property tax bill and the current budget for Miami-Dade County. So if my taxes would have been in the no budget change category, it would have been a pretty significant reduction, down from the $9,100 down to about $7,685 a year. So that would have saved me about $1,700 a year or so. But now I'm only really saving about $300 a year compared to what it was before I even had the homestead exemption. Now, when we take what my bill should have been if there was no budget increase at $76.85, okay, but it really ended up being $88.39 after all the budget increases. That's a 13% increase in my property tax bill in 1 year, okay? And here's the problem. Everybody thinks that because you have a homestead exemption in the state of Florida, that your property tax bill cannot go up more than 3% per year. But that is actually false. And I'm going to prove to you why that is the case, because what really the problem is here is people's understanding of how the homestead exemption actually works. So here's how the Homestead and Save Our Homes Act is supposed to work. When someone owns property and makes it his or her permanent residence, the property owner may be eligible to receive a homestead exemption that would decrease the property's taxable value by as much as $50,000. This exemption qualifies the home for the Save Our Homes assessment limitation. While the exemption is non-transferable, a homeowner may be able to port all or part of the assessment difference to a new Florida homestead. Now, in addition to this, there are further benefits available to property owners with disabilities, senior citizens, veterans, and active duty military, disabled first responders, and properties with specialized uses. All those conditions can qualify for additional homestead exemptions. So beyond the $50,000 exemption that everybody gets, you can get additional exemptions. And one of the most notable ones is for senior citizens. I don't have all the requirements in front of me, but if you've lived in the state of Florida for 25 years and your home value is below a certain threshold, you could potentially have a full exemption and pay no property taxes. But because of the home values here shooting up as much as they have in Florida, that's probably not going to be the case for most people, unfortunately, because your assessed value on the property will just be too high. So how this works is after the first year, a home receives a homestead exemption and the property appraiser assesses it at just value. The assessment for each following year cannot increase more than 3% or the percent change in the consumer price index, whichever is less. And they also say that even if the value of your home decreases, the assessed value may increase, but only by this limited amount. The assessed value will never be more than the just value of your home. But let me explain to you why this is a scam, guys. Because first of all, your property cannot go up more than 3% or the change in the CPI, whichever is less, right? So we know that inflation is out of control right now, and you know that the CPI is going to be higher than 3% most likely for the year. And so that's pretty much a guarantee that you're going to see a 3% increase in your assessed value no matter where you live in the state of Florida, most likely. But the problem is it doesn't stop there. The reason why you can see my property tax bill has gone up so much, even though I'm technically paying less than the year before, I'm very close to paying as much as I did before I even had the homestead exemption. And that's because of the millage rates. When you take a second look at my bill, you can see these millage rates are what really made my property tax bill go up. So even if your assessed value on your house always stays the same, it doesn't matter, because where you live, your local county budget can increase these millage rates at will without your approval, by the way. The voters don't get to approve this in a lot of different scenarios, maybe some different ballot measures, but not all of them. And so that's how they get you guys, especially with the school taxes, because the school taxes are also exempt from half of your homestead exemption. That's why you can see on my property tax bill that most of the taxable value throughout all of it is $458,910. But in the public schools section, it's actually $483,910, which is $25,000 more that they're allowed to charge taxes based on a higher assessed value on my property than any other form of taxes, even though I don't have kids. So it's not really that the homestead exemption is a lie, it's that people's understanding of it is not really up to par. People think that their property tax bill cannot go up more than 3% per year in total. But I just showed you and proved to you that that is not the case, because mine was able to go up 13% based on a new budget proposal that did pass. So of course it always passes. And when you take a look at how much the millage rates went up, guys, it's pretty substantial in many cases. So you can see here the school millage rates jumped from 2.84 to 3.31, 1.485 to 2.24. The last one stayed the same at just 1. The Miami Beach millage rate also jumped from 5.1 to 5.8. You have the Miami-Dade County millage rate jumping from 4.12 to 4.57. And the list goes on, guys. Those are the biggest jumps. Those are the big ones that really get you. So your city, your county, and the school board are the ones that are scamming you the most and taking all of your money. Now, as far as I know, and don't quote me on this because I don't know this for 100% truth, but I don't think there's any limit on how much or how many times the county or the school board or your local city can raise the millage rate. So even though there's that 3% cap on the assessed value, that assessed value can't go up by more than 3%, it doesn't keep your property tax bill from skyrocketing, guys. If they want to adopt a new budget and continue increasing, these millage rates, then that's a guarantee that you're going to see your property tax bill go up even with the homestead exemption, and could be by a lot more than 13%. The real test is going to be by next year, because I went from having no homestead exemption to a homestead exemption, and now that would be the second year in a row, if I don't sell this place first, with the homestead exemption, to see how much percentage of an increase I get the following year for 2025. But the problem is people have this false misunderstanding that if you have a homestead exemption here in Florida, that you're just never going to see your tax bill go up by more than 3% a year. Well, I just showed you I had a 13% increase in just 1 year of my actual tax bill. And here's the problem, guys. Even when real estate values tank, okay, at some point in the future they probably will, so your assessed value can go down, which can lower your property tax bill. But if they keep increasing the millage rates to compensate for that, you could essentially see your property tax bill stay the same or flat, maybe even still go up, even if the value of your property is going down. Now, I have seen property tax bills here go down, even on my walks when we look at different houses and what they're paying in property taxes. I have seen numerous examples of the tax bill going down, but let me tell you, it never goes down as much as it goes up. In case you can't tell, this video has been basically all about Florida. And here's something that really pertains to us here in Florida, is that according to a new hurricane study, they're saying now we need to add a Category 6 hurricane to the scale, guys. It's called the Saffir-Simpson Hurricane Wind Scale. That's how they measure which category the hurricanes are. Right now, the Category 5 is the highest limit that we have, with wind speeds reaching 157 miles per hour or faster. But this study just came out this week and says that this is no longer accurate, because there have been a number of recent storms that have already achieved technically a hypothetical Category 6, which would be wind speeds of 192 miles per hour and faster. Of 197 Category 5 storms between 1980 and 2021, half occurred in the last 17 years. They also found out that these hypothetical Category 6 storms all happened within the last 9 years. Now, I wish they would say which storms meet this criteria. They don't give the actual names, so that way people who have been here and gone through the hurricanes, you can say, hey, I went through a Category 6 hurricane, whenever they readjust the scale, because that is just wild, guys. It's kind of amazing to me, as somebody who's lived down here for 16 years now, even just knowing how severe these hurricanes can be, that you still have all these people pouring into here. Like, when I first moved here, I was young and dumb. Like, I wasn't that dumb, but dumber than I am now. And at 20 years old, you don't really think about hurricanes. I still had Hurricane Katrina pretty fresh in my mind, because that was in 2004, I think. And I moved here in 2008, so that was only 4 years prior. So I knew the devastation that a large hurricane could cause, but just like everybody else, you think that it can never happen to you, until it did happen here in Miami Beach with Hurricane Irma in 2017, and I was here for it. And I wouldn't recommend anybody go through a hurricane, because it sucks. And it's very dangerous, guys. You lose your amenities, you lose water, you lose electricity. You know, everything's closed for days or weeks at a time. It's not a good situation to be in. Here we have a house for $1,450,000 that they just bought in July of 2023 for $1,060,000. They thought they were going to be getting rich being a landlord here, trying to rent the house for $9,900. Had to lower it all the way down to $6,400. Still couldn't get it rented. and now they're just deciding to go ahead and sell this house because it's not turning the profit that they wanted. And I'm willing to bet that their property tax bill has shot through the roof, because it's still showing that it's $4,000 a year based on the previous owner, but I'm willing to bet it's probably $20,000, $30,000 a year, if not more now. And that's another reason homestead exemption is basically a scam here, because you have similar houses in a similar neighborhood. They should all be paying roughly the same in property taxes, but as you can see, that is far beyond the case. This person paying only about $4,000 a year, whereas their neighbor that we saw earlier behind on the water is paying $44,000 a year. But I think ultimately the pandemic changed so many things. You know, Florida was one of the only states that was truly open during the pandemic. There was still spring break going on, still all kinds of parties everywhere. Most places were still open, and we refused to shut down our economy here in Florida. And consequences of that were we had an exploding economy here, and obviously the home prices jumped through the roof because everybody wanted to be here, and they came, and they're still coming even though it's slowing down. And that's why we see, back like what we were talking about at the beginning of this video, that the home prices here are completely unaffordable now, even in areas that used to be deemed extremely affordable. But as a local, I just kind of question, how long can that continue for? Are we going to continue seeing people pour into Florida? Because as the prices continue to go up, there's only going to be so many people out there that can afford to buy the real estate here, guys. But what I see happening, at least here where I live, is half of these houses that we walk by here, you know, obviously somebody lives here, but half of these houses are empty, guys. Same things with the condos. You know, you walk down the boardwalk in Miami Beach at nighttime, half of the lights in all these buildings are all out. There's nobody's there. And that's what you call a lot of shadow inventory. You have a lot of homes here throughout the state of Florida that are owned as second homes, or just, you know, a vacation house that I'm going to use 3 times a year, and the rest of the time it just sits empty. Combine that with all the people who have been speculating on Airbnb and turning our rentals into Airbnbs and buying homes for that, it's gotten out of control. But I would highly, highly suggest to anybody that's looking to move to Florida today in 2024 is to look at the prices, not only of the homes, guys, but just look at, you know, go visit the area, go grocery shopping for a week's worth of groceries, stay here for a couple weeks in the neighborhood that you think you want to live in, and see what the cost of living is. Go out to eat a couple times at a restaurant and see what that costs, and fill up your car with gas, and find out how much you would be paying for homeowner's insurance on the house you're looking to buy. Find out what the property taxes are for the current owner and how much it's projected to be once you become the owner, because I think a lot of people will be completely shocked at what the answer to those questions would be. So if you guys enjoyed this video, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and if you don't want to wait for my next video to come out, check out this one on the screen right over here, and I'll see you in the next one.